There's a figure that appears in every culture, every era, every story worth telling. The fool, not the idiot or the ignorant, but the one who plays dumb while seeing everything, who speaks truth through jest, who somehow always survives while the wise and powerful fall. The psychology of the fool reveals one of humanity's most profound paradoxes, that wisdom often wears the mask of folly. And the greatest intelligence sometimes disguises itself as simplicity. The fool occupies a unique psychological space that defies our normal categories. They're neither insider nor outsider, neither powerful nor powerless, neither wise nor ignorant. They exist in the liminal space between all opposites, free to move between worlds that others are locked into. This freedom comes from their willingness to appear foolish, to be laughed at, to be underestimated, a price most people are unwilling to pay. Shakespeare understood this perfectly. Fools are often the wisest characters in the play, the only ones who can tell the king the truth because they deliver it as entertainment. The fool can say what would get anyone else executed because they've already accepted the social death of being seen as ridiculous. Having nothing to lose, they become paradoxically invulnerable. I once knew a corporate executive who consciously adopted the fool's strategy. In meetings full of posturing and political maneuvering, he would ask stupid questions that everyone was thinking, but no one dared voice. "I'm probably missing something obvious, but why are we doing this?" He'd play dumb about office politics, pretending not to understand the unspoken power dynamics that everyone else carefully navigated. This apparent naivety gave him extraordinary freedom. He could cross hierarchical boundaries, challenge sacred cows, and speak truths that would have been career suicide for anyone trying to appear competent. The psychological power of the fool comes from what Carl Jung called the trickster archetype, the part of the psyche that disrupts order to reveal deeper truths. The fool doesn't play by the rules because they see that the rules themselves are a kind of collective madness. While everyone else is trapped in the game, the fool is playing a different game entirely. One where losing in conventional terms might be winning in ways that matter more. Think about the court jesters of medieval times. They were often the only ones who could criticize the king, mock the nobility, and point out the absurdities of power. But their ability to do this didn't come from courage in the conventional sense. It came from their willingness to be seen as lowly, ridiculous, beneath serious consideration. By accepting the lowest social position, they gained a kind of inverted power, the power of having no status to protect. The fool's psychology operates on a principle that most people can't fathom: that dignity and freedom are often inversely related. The more concerned you are with maintaining your dignity, your reputation, your status, the less free you become. Every action must be calculated, every word measured, every gesture performed with an eye toward how it will be perceived. But the fool has abandoned this exhausting performance. They've accepted being laughed at, and in that acceptance found a liberation that those laughing at them will never know. This is particularly powerful in confronting authority. Authority depends on being taken seriously, on maintaining an aura of importance and legitimacy. The fool's response isn't direct opposition, which would legitimize the authority by treating it as worth opposing. Instead, the fool reveals authority's absurdity through excessive agreement. Through taking rules to their logical but ridiculous conclusions, through enthusiasm so exaggerated it becomes mockery. A woman told me about dealing with an impossibly controlling manager by becoming a fool. Instead of resisting his micromanagement, she began enthusiastically embracing it to an absurd degree. She would send him updates every 15 minutes. Ask for approval on the smallest decisions. Request meetings to discuss the font choice in emails. She played the perfect, eager-to-please employee to such an extreme that it revealed the absurdity of his management style. Within weeks, he was begging her to use her own judgment, to stop asking for so much guidance. She had defeated control through excessive compliance, a classic fool's gambit. The fool also operates on a different relationship with knowledge. While the expert hoards knowledge as power, the fool pretends to know nothing and thereby learns everything. People reveal secrets to fools because they assume they're too stupid to understand or too powerless to matter. The fool asks questions others are too proud to ask, admits confusion others are too insecure to acknowledge, and thereby gains understanding that escapes those who need to appear knowledgeable. This connects to what Socrates meant by knowing that you know nothing. The philosophical fool doesn't pretend to have answers, but instead asks questions that reveal the emptiness of others' certainties. They're not ignorant. They're performing ignorance as a way of exposing the ignorance that masquerades as knowledge. The fool knows that most of what passes for wisdom is just sophisticated confusion, elaborate ways of avoiding simple truths. In mythology and folklore, the fool often appears at crucial moments to save the hero through seemingly idiotic advice that turns out to be exactly right. This reflects a psychological truth that our conscious, rational mind often leads us astray, while the foolish parts of ourselves, intuition, playfulness, spontaneity, might know exactly what we need. The fool represents the wisdom of the unconscious, the intelligence that doesn't explain itself but simply knows. The tarot deck begins with the Fool card, numbered 0, both nothing and everything, the beginning and the end. The fool steps off a cliff with perfect trust, not because they are stupid, but because they understand something about the nature of reality that the careful, rational mind cannot grasp. They know that what looks like a cliff might be a doorway, that what seems like falling might be flying, that what appears to be foolishness might be the highest wisdom. Modern psychology recognizes this in the concept of positive deviance, the idea that solutions to complex problems often come from those willing to deviate from normal behavior to risk looking foolish. The fool is the ultimate positive deviant, someone whose apparent stupidity allows them to try things that smart people know won't work, and thereby sometimes discover that they do work. The fool's relationship with failure is completely different from most people's. For the fool, failure isn't a source of shame, but of information. Not a verdict, but an experiment. They can fail publicly, repeatedly, spectacularly, because they're not attached to an image of competence. This gives them a massive advantage in learning and adaptation. While others are protecting their track record, the fool is accumulating experience. Children are natural fools in the best sense. They ask obvious questions, state uncomfortable truths, and haven't yet learned what they're supposed to pretend not to notice. The process of socialization is largely about teaching children not to be fools, to be appropriate, to maintain dignity, to respect hierarchies. But in gaining social competence, we lose the fool's superpower, the ability to see and say what everyone else has agreed to ignore. The digital age has created new opportunities for the fool's strategy. Online, people who are willing to be ridiculed, memed, and mocked can achieve influence that those protecting their dignity never could. The fool goes viral precisely because they're not trying to maintain respectability. They say what others only think, do what others only imagine, fail in ways others are too scared to attempt. But being a fool isn't just about external strategy. It's about internal psychology. The fool has made peace with their own shadow, their own ridiculousness, their own fundamental absurdity as a human being. They've stopped pretending to be more than they are, which paradoxically allows them to become more than they seemed. They've accepted the comedy of existence rather than insisting on its tragedy or heroism. This is why the fool often laughs at inappropriate moments, finds humor in dire situations, responds to aggression with playfulness. They're not being insensitive. They're operating from a different perspective where the things others take seriously seem genuinely funny. They see the arbitrary nature of social conventions, the pretense and power, the costume drama that everyone else mistakes for reality. The therapeutic value of the fool's perspective is immense. Many psychological problems come from taking ourselves too seriously, from believing our own performance, from forgetting that our personalities are just masks we've worn so long we've forgotten we're wearing them. The fool reminds us that we could take them off, that we could play different roles, that the drama we're so invested in is still just a drama. A therapist's friend tells clients to find your inner fool when they're stuck in rigid patterns. What would you do if you didn't have to be respectable? What would you say if you weren't afraid of looking stupid? What would you try if failure was funny rather than shameful? These questions often unlock possibilities that years of serious analysis couldn't access. The fool also understands something profound about power, that true power often comes from appearing powerless. The person everyone underestimates has endless opportunities to surprise. The one nobody takes seriously can move through spaces others can't access. The fool can gather information, build alliances, and position themselves while everyone else is watching the obvious players. But perhaps the fool's greatest insight is that life itself is fundamentally absurd. We're conscious beings in an unconscious universe, aware of our mortality, but acting as if we'll live forever, taking seriously things that won't matter in a year, while ignoring things that define our entire existence. The fool doesn't try to resolve this absurdity, but embraces it, dances with it, makes it the source of freedom rather than anxiety. In relationships, the fool's approach can be transformative. Instead of the exhausting performance of trying to be impressive, attractive, worthy, the fool simply shows up as they are, ridiculous and real. They make jokes that don't land, admit ignorance about things they should know, reveal vulnerabilities that others would hide. And paradoxically, this authenticity becomes more attractive than any performance could be. The shadow side of the fool is the genuine fool, the person who isn't playing dumb but actually is, who isn't strategically naive but actually naive, who isn't choosing vulnerability but is simply vulnerable. The conscious fool knows when to drop the mask, when foolishness becomes genuinely dangerous, when play needs to give way to seriousness. They're playing a role, not trapped in it. As you consider the fool's psychology, notice where in your life you're working hardest to maintain dignity, to appear competent, to be taken seriously. What would happen if you stopped? What truths could you tell if you weren't afraid of being laughed at? What questions could you ask if you weren't worried about looking ignorant? What experiments could you try if failure was amusing rather than shameful? The fool's ultimate wisdom is recognizing that we're all fools pretending to be wise, all making it up as we go along, all performing roles we've forgotten, our performances. The conscious fool just admits it, and in that admission finds a freedom, a lightness, a capacity for truth-telling and boundary crossing that those clinging to their dignity will never know. They've discovered that the joke isn't on them. The joke is them, and they're in on it. And that makes all the difference. Wretch Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.